I'm an old man now. My hands shake when I hold a coffee cup. I forget names sometimes. But I remember February 20th, 1945, like it was this morning. I remember the weight of those grenades. I remember thinking I was 17 years old, and I was about to die on an island I'd never heard of 6 months before. People call me a hero. They gave me medals. They shook my hand. President Truman himself put the Medal of Honor around my neck. But when I close my eyes at night, I don't see a hero. I see a boy. A foolish, terrified boy who lied about his age because he thought war was something glorious. I've lived 70 more years since that day. I've had a family. I've watched grandchildren grow. I've buried friends. And every single one of those years, I've carried Iwo Jima with me. Not like a burden exactly. More like a scar that never quite stops aching when the weather changes. This is my story. Not the version they put in newspapers. Not the one they teach in schools. This is what it felt like. What it smelled like. What it cost. I was born in Plymouth, North Carolina, in 1928. Small town. The kind where everyone knows your name and your business. My daddy worked hard. My mama kept us fed during the Depression when plenty of folks went hungry. We didn't have much, but we had enough. I was the kind of boy who couldn't sit still. Always running, always getting into something I shouldn't. My mama used to say I was born restless. She'd send me out to fetch water or chop wood just to give herself some peace. I'd do the chore, sure, but then I'd wander off into the woods, imagining I was Daniel Boone or some explorer discovering new territory. The war started when I was 13. Pearl Harbor. I remember hearing it on the radio. Didn't fully understand what it meant at first, but I saw how my daddy's face went hard. How the men in town started talking different. How boys I knew, just a few years older, started signing up. By 1942, the whole country had changed. Every thing was about the war. Rationing. War bonds. Gold stars and windows. And every boy my age wanted to be part of it. We didn't understand. We thought it was adventure. We thought it was glory. I tried to enlist when I was 14. They laughed me out of the recruitment office. I was too small, too young, too obvious. But I didn't give up. I was stubborn. My mama called it my worst quality. I called it determination. By 1943, I was 15 and tall for my age. I'd been working on farms, getting stronger. I practiced making my voice deeper. I studied how the older boys walked and talked. I forged my mama's signature on a permission form. I added 2 years to my birth date. I walked into that recruitment office in Norfolk, Virginia, and I lied through my teeth. The recruiter looked at me hard. I kept my eyes steady. Didn't blink. Didn't fidget. I'd practiced this. "You're 17?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. Firm. Clear. He looked at my paperwork. Looked at me. Then he stamped. It. I was in. I didn't feel guilty then. I felt proud. I felt like I'd finally done something important. I wrote my mama a letter from boot camp. Told her I was sorry, but this was something I had to do. I don't know if she ever forgave me. She died while I was overseas. I never got to ask her. Boot camp at Parris Island was hell. They designed it that way. Break you down, build you back up as a Marine. I was younger than everyone else, but I couldn't let it show. I worked twice as hard. I ran faster. I shot straighter. I kept my mouth shut and my head down. The drill instructors were mean as snakes. They'd get in your face and scream until spit flew. They'd make you do push-ups in the mud until your arms gave out. They'd run you until you puked. And if you complained, they'd run you more. I never complained. There was a boy in my unit named Tommy. He was 18, from Ohio. He figured out I was younger than I claimed. Caught me one night when I was writing a letter home, saw the date I almost wrote down before I caught myself. "How old are you really?" he asked. I looked at him. Thought about lying. But something in his face was kind. 15. I said. Almost 16. He didn't tell anyone. We became friends. He watched out for me. Made sure I didn't do anything too stupid. Tommy was good people. I never saw him after we shipped out to different units. I don't know if he made it home. I hope he did. After boot camp, they assigned me to the 5th Marine Division. We were training for something big. They wouldn't tell us what, but we knew. You could feel it. The intensity. The focus. They drilled us on amphibious landings, beach assaults, fighting in confined spaces, urban combat. I turned 16 at Camp Pendleton. Didn't tell anyone. Just another day of training. I remember thinking how different it was from the birthday before. That one, Mama had made me a cake. Small, because of rationing, but she'd saved up sugar for weeks. This one, I crawled through. Ugh, barbed wire while machine guns fired over my head. I was good at being a Marine. Better than I expected. I was small, which made me a harder target. I was fast. I didn't freeze under pressure. The officers noticed. They started giving me more responsibility. But late at night, lying in my bunk, I'd think about home. About Mama's cooking. About fishing in the creek behind our house. About how simple life had been. I'd wonder what I'd gotten myself into. I still didn't understand. Not really. Not yet. In January 1945, they finally told us. Iwo Jima. A little volcanic island halfway between the Mariana Islands and Japan. 8 square miles of rock and ash. The briefing officers showed us maps. Aerial photographs. They said it was strategic. We needed it for fighter escorts and emergency bomber landings. They said it would be tough. They didn't say how tough. We studied those maps for weeks. Mount Suribachi. The beaches. The interior terrain. They told us the island had been bombed. For months. They told us we'd have naval and air support. They told us the Japanese were dug in deep, but we'd root them out. I was assigned to C Company, 1st Battalion, 26th Marines. We trained for the landing. Over and over. Hit the beach, move inland, establish positions. They made it sound simple. I wrote letters home. Told my family I was fine. Told them not to worry. I couldn't tell them where I was going. Everything was classified. But I tried to sound confident. Tried to sound like a man instead of a boy. The night before we shipped out, I couldn't sleep. None of us could. We played cards. Smoked cigarettes. Told jokes that weren't funny. Anything to keep our minds off what was coming. I was 17 years old. I'd be landing on Iwo Jima with the first wave. The voyage across the Pacific felt endless. We were packed into transport ships like sardines. Hot. Crowded. The smell of too many men in too small a space. Diesel fuel. Sweat. Fear. I spent a lot of time on deck. When I could. Watching the ocean. It was beautiful in a way that seemed wrong. All that blue. All that peaceful water. And we were heading towards something terrible. Some men got quiet. Some got loud. Some prayed. Some wrote letters they might never get to send. I mostly watched and listened. Tried to learn from the veterans. The ones who'd been at Guadalcanal or Tarawa. They had a look in their eyes. Like they'd seen something they couldn't unsee. One of them, a sergeant named Mackenzie, sat down next to me one evening. "How old are you, kid?" he asked. 17, sir," I said. The lie came automatic now. He looked at me like he knew better. "You scared?" I thought about lying about that too. But I didn't. "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it freeze you. When the ramp drops, you run. You hear me? Don't stop. Don't think. Just run." I never forgot that advice. It probably saved my life. We could hear the bombardment before we could see the isle. And thunder. Constant, rolling thunder. For 3 days before the landing, the Navy pounded Iwo Jima. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carrier planes dropping bombs. They said it was the heaviest pre-invasion bombardment in the Pacific. They said nothing could survive it. They were wrong. When we finally saw the island, it looked like hell itself. Black sand, gray rock, smoke rising from 100 points. Mount Suribachi looming over the southern end like a dark tooth. I stood on the deck and stared at it. That's where I was going. That's where some of us wouldn't come back from. The night before the landing, they fed us steak and eggs. Traditional. Last good meal before you hit the beach. Some men couldn't eat. I forced it down. Didn't know when I'd eat again. I checked my gear a dozen times. Rifle. Ammunition. Grenades. Canteen. First aid kit. Everything had to be perfect. My hands were shaking. All around me, men were doing the same thing. Checking gear. Writing last let. RS. Praying. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? I tried to sleep. Couldn't. Just lay there in the dark, listening to the ship creak and the distant rumble of the bombardment. Thinking about my mama. About home. About whether I'd ever see them again. I was 17 years old, and I was more afraid than I'd ever been in my life. February 19, 1945. H-hour 0900. The ramp dropped, and everything became noise and chaos. Sergeant Mackenzie's words echoed in my head. Run. Don't stop. Don't think. The beach was black. Volcanic sand. It sucked at your boots. Made every step a fight. Men were yelling. Officers shouting orders. Explosions everywhere. The air smelled like sulfur and gunpowder. I ran. Rifle held high. Trying to keep up with the men ahead of me. The sand was loose, deep. Like trying to run through gravel. My legs burned. Machine gun fire. I didn't know where it was coming from. Everywhere. Nowhere. Men were falling. I kept running. We were supposed to move quickly. Why across the beach? Get inland. But the sand made it impossible. We were slow. Exposed. Target practice. I dove behind a ridge of sand. Other Marines piled in beside me. We were breathing hard. Wild-eyed. The sound was deafening. Move! Move! Someone was screaming. We got up. Ran again. Fell again. The beach was littered with equipment. Destroyed vehicles. Bodies. I don't know how long it took to get off that beach. Felt like hours. Was probably minutes. Time stopped making sense. When we finally got to the first terrace, I looked back. The beach was chaos. Landing craft still coming in. Explosions in the water. The Navy still firing over our heads at targets inland. I was alive. Somehow, I was still alive. The first 3 days were a blur. We fought for every yard. The Japanese were dug in everywhere. Bunkers. Tunnels, caves. You'd clear a position, move forward, and get shot at from behind. They'd pop up out of holes you swore you checked. We slept in foxholes. When we SLE? PT mostly we stayed awake. Scared to close our eyes. The Japanese would infiltrate at night. You'd hear movement. Couldn't see anything in the dark. You'd shoot at sounds. At shadows. I saw men die. Boys, really. Same age as me, or close to it. 1 minute they were alive. Talking. Scared but alive. Next minute they were gone. Just gone. You don't think about it in the moment. Can't. You keep moving. Keep fighting. Keep breathing. But at night, when it's quiet, you remember. Their faces. Their voices. The way they fell. I threw up the first time I saw a man get hit. Just turned and threw up. Sergeant Mackenzie grabbed me by the shoulder. You can be sick later, he said. Not mean. Just factual. Right now, stay sharp. I wiped my mouth. Picked up my rifle. Kept going. We ran out of water on the second day. The supply lines were a mess. The beach was still under fire. Everything took longer than it should. I remember being so thirsty I would have drunk anything. My lips cracked. My ennui felt thick. When water finally came, it was in little sips. Rationed. I made that canteen last as long as I could. On the fifth day, February 23rd, they raised the flag on Mount Suribachi. We were fighting in the interior of the island when we heard the cheers. Looked up and saw it. The stars and stripes flying on top of that mountain. Men were yelling. Crying. Ships offshore were blowing their horns. For just a moment, it felt like victory. But we were still dying. The battle wasn't close to over. Suribachi was just the beginning. The real fight was ahead of us. The center of the island. The fortifications. The places where the Japanese had dug deepest. That flag gave us something, though. Hope, maybe. Proof we could do this. We could take this island. I looked at that flag and thought about home. About what it meant. About all the men who died to put it there. Then we went back to fighting. The fighting in central Iwo Jima was worse than the beach. Worse than anything I'd imagined. The Japanese had built an entire fortress underground. Miles of tunnels. Reinforced bunkers. Positions that could take days to clear. We'd use flamethrowers. Explosives. Pour gasoline into openings and light it. Horrible ways to fight. Horrible ways to die. Every bunker cost us men. Every cave. Every pillbox. I stopped thinking about tomorrow. About next week. About home. I thought about the next minute. The next hour. Stay alive that long. Then do it again. We fought in the rain. In the cold. The volcanic ash turned to mud. Got in everything. Your rifle. Your food. Your eyes. You breathed it. Tasted it constantly. I hadn't showered in 2 weeks. None of us had. We smelled like death and sweat and fear. My uniform was stiff with dried mud and blood. Some of it mine. Most of it not. I'd stopped being afraid in the normal way. It became background noise. Like being cold or tired. Just another thing you lived with. February 20th, 1945. The day I died and lived. We were advancing through a network of Japanese positions. My unit. C Company. Moving slow. Clearing as we went. It was late morning. I was with a group of men. We were exhausted. Filthy. Running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. We'd just taken a position. Thought we'd cleared it. Thought we were safe for a minute. I was 17 years old. I'd been on Iwo Jima for 1 day. Just 1 day. Then I saw them. 2 grenades. Japanese Type 97 grenades. They landed right in the middle of us. Just appeared. Thrown from somewhere. From a position we thought we'd cleared. Everything slowed down. I saw them clearly. Saw the fuses burning. Saw the men around me. 4 or 5 men. Boys. Same as me. I didn't think. There wasn't time to think. I dove. I threw myself on top of those grenades. Covered them with my body. Pulled them underneath me. Against my chest. I had maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds to know I was about to die. I thought about my mama. About home. About the fact that I was 17 and this was it. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. But those men. Those boys. I couldn't watch them die. Not if I could stop it. Time stopped. Everything stopped. Then the grenades exploded. The pain was beyond description. Beyond anything I have words for. It felt like being hit by lightning. By a truck. By the world ending. The force threw me. I felt ribs break. Felt my insides tear. Tasted blood. I remember thinking, I'm dead. This is what dying feels like. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. I was on the ground. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe right. Blood everywhere. My blood. Pouring out of me. The other men were yelling. Someone was screaming for a corpseman. I think I was screaming too. Or maybe I couldn't scream. Maybe I was just making sounds. I'd taken shrapnel in my chest. My arm. My side. Over 200 pieces of metal inside me. One grenade had detonated full force. The other had mostly detonated, but I'd smothered it enough to save the others. I should have died instantly. The doctors said so later. No one survives that. No one. But I did. The corpsmen reached me fast. Navy medics. They were heroes, those men. Ran through fire to save Marines. I remember one of them looking at me. His face went white. Holy Christ, he said. They worked on me right there. Under fire. Explosions still happening around us. They were trying to stop the bleeding. Trying to stabilize me enough to move. I was fading in and out. The pain would spike and I'd see everything clear. Then it would dull and everything would go gray. I heard one of them say I wasn't going to make it. Said it quiet, but I heard it. I wanted to tell him I wasn't ready to die. Wanted to tell him I was just 17. Wanted to tell him I'd lied to get here and that seemed real stupid now. But I couldn't talk. Could barely breathe. They got me on a stretcher. Started carrying me back toward the beach. Toward the aid station. Every step jarred me. Every jar was agony. I remember. Looking at the sky. It was gray. Smoke everywhere. The smell of sulfur and blood. I remember thinking, Mama, I'm sorry. Then I passed out. I woke up on a ship. Hospital ship. USS Samaritan. I'd been evacuated off the island. Didn't remember the boat ride. Didn't remember much of anything. The doctors were working on me. Trying to remove shrapnel. Trying to stop internal bleeding. Trying to keep me alive. I drifted in and out for days. Sometimes I'd wake up and think I was still on the island. Still fighting. I'd try to get up. They'd hold me down. Give me something to make me sleep. Other times I'd wake up and remember what happened. Remember the grenades. Remember the explosion. Remember the pain. I was in surgery multiple times. They couldn't get all the shrapnel out. Too much of it. Too close to vital organs. They took out what they could. Left the rest. I still have over 100 pieces of metal inside me. 70 years later. Still there. Still setting off metal detors. Still aching when the weather changes. The doctors told me later I shouldn't have survived. The odds were impossible. The damage was too severe. By all rights, I should have died on that island. But I didn't. They sent me to a hospital in Guam. Naval Hospital. I spent weeks there. Months, maybe. Time blurred together. I couldn't walk at first. Could barely move. The pain was constant. They gave me morphine. It helped. Not enough, but it helped. I shared a ward with other wounded men. Some worse than me. Some not as bad. We didn't talk much at first. Just lay there. Breathing. Trying to heal. Slowly, I started to improve. Started to move a little. Started to think about something other than pain. The nurses were kind. They'd write letters for us. To our families. I dictated a letter to my mama. Told her I was okay. Told her I'd been hurt, but I was going to be fine. I didn't tell her how bad it was. Didn't tell her I'd almost died. Didn't tell her about the grenades. She found out anyway. Everyone found out. Someone had seen what I did. Reported it. The story got around. The kid who threw himself on grenades. The kid who saved his squad. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a boy who'd made a choice in 2 seconds and somehow lived through it. In March, an officer came to see me. Told me I was being recommended for the Medal of Honor. I didn't understand at first. Didn't process it. The Medal of Honor. The highest military decoration. For valor in combat. for actions above and beyond the call of duty. You saved those men, the officer said. You threw yourself on 2 grenades. You should be dead. But you're not. And those men are alive because of you. I didn't know what to say. I still don't know what to say about it, all these years later. I didn't do it for medals. I didn't do it for glory. I did it because those were my brothers. My fellow Marines. And I couldn't let them die. The officer shook my hand. Told me I'd made the Corps proud. Then he left. I lay there in that hospital bed, 17 years old, full of shrapnel and morphine, and tried to understand what had happened to my life. As I healed, I started learning about the battle. About what it had cost. Iwo Jima lasted 36 days. From February 19th to March 26th. Nearly 7,000 Americans died. Almost 20,000 wounded. The Japanese garrison. Nearly 21,000 men. Almost all of them died. They fought to the last. No surrender. I'd been there for 1 day. 1 day. And it had nearly killed me. I thought about the men who'd fought for all 36 days. Who'd survived the whole battle. I couldn't imagine it. Couldn't wrap my mind around it. I thought about the men who didn't survive. The ones who landed with me on February 19th and never left. The ones who died taking Suribachi. The ones who died in the tunnels and caves. I thought about Tommy from boot camp. About whether he'd been there. About whether he'd made it. I thought about the men I'd saved. The ones who'd be. And standing next to me when those grenades landed. I never learned all their names. Never saw them again. But they were alive because I jumped. That thought helped. A little. In the dark moments when the pain was bad and I wondered why I'd survived, that thought helped. Eventually, the truth came out. About my age. I was still 17. Wouldn't turn 18 until February 14th. When I jumped on those grenades, I was 6 days past my 17th birthday. The youngest Medal of Honor recipient in World War II. Probably the youngest Marine to ever receive it. The papers loved that detail. The boy hero. The kid who lied to enlist. My mama found out I'd lied about my age from a newspaper. Not from me. From a reporter who tracked her down in North Carolina to get a quote about her hero's son. I can't imagine what that was like for her. Finding out I'd been in combat. Finding out I'd nearly died. Finding out I'd lied to be there. She never said she was angry. Just said she was glad. I was alive. Said she prayed for me every day. I wished I could have told her myself. Done it right. But I was 17 and stupid and recovering from grenade wounds halfway across the world. Some things you can't take back. You just have to live with them. October 5, 1945. The White House. President Harry S. Truman placed the Medal of Honor around my neck. I was 18 years old. Still healing. Still full of shrapnel. Standing in a uniform that felt too big and too heavy. The war was over. Japan had surrendered in August. The world was celebrating peace. And I was being honored for war. President Truman shook my hand. Looked me in the eye. You're a brave young man, he said. I wanted to tell him I wasn't brave. I was just scared and made a choice. But you don't argue with the president. There were cameras. Reporters. Questions. Everyone wanted to know how it felt. What I was thinking. If I'd do it again. I didn't know how to answer. Still don't. How do you explain the T-moment? Those 2 seconds? The choice that wasn't really a choice? I smiled. Said what I thought I should say. Thanked everyone. Played the part of the hero. But inside, I was still on Iwo Jima. Still feeling those grenades explode. Still wondering why I'd lived when so many others had died. After the ceremony, I tried to go home. Tried to be normal. It didn't work. I was 18 years old with a Medal of Honor, and no idea what to do with the rest of my life. I'd go to town and people would recognize me. Want to shake my hand. Want to hear the story. Want me to be inspiring. I'd smile and tell them what they wanted to hear. But it felt hollow. At night I couldn't sleep. I'd hear explosions that weren't there. Smell sulfur. Feel the ground shake. Wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for a rifle that wasn't beside me. Nobody talked about that stuff then. Shell shock. Combat fatigue. What we call PTSD now. You were just supposed to come home and be fine. Be grateful you survived. I tried. I really did. But I was angry. Angry at everything. Angry at nothing. I'd snap at my family. Push people away. Drink too much. I was too young to have gone to war. Too young to carry what I was carrying. But I did anyway. The healing took years. Decades, really? Physical healing came first. Surgeries to remove more shrapnel. Physical therapy to regain full mobility. My body slowly knitted itself back together. Mostly. Emotional healing took longer. I had to learn to talk about it. Had to learn that the nightmares didn't make me weak. That the anger and the fear and the guilt were normal. That other veterans felt the same things. I went back to school. Finished my education. Tried to build a life. I got married. Had children. Found work. Did all the things you're supposed to do. But Iwo Jima was always there. In the back of my mind. In the shrapnel still lodged in my body. In the way I'd flinch at loud noises. In the way February 20th would come around every year. I'd feel 17 again. I met some of the men I'd saved. Years later. They tracked me down. Wanted to say thank you. That helped more than anything else. Seeing them alive. Seeing their families. Their kids. Knowing that my 2 seconds had given them decades. One of them, a man named Charlie, hugged me and cried. Said I gave him his life? Said his daughter wouldn't exist without me? I cried too. First time I'd cried about Iwo Jima since it happened. I'm 96 years old as I tell you this story. I've lived a long life. Longer than I ever expected that day on Iwo Jima. I've thought a lot about why I survived. Why those grenades didn't kill me. Why I got to come home when so many others didn't. I don't have answers. Just questions. Was it luck? Divine intervention? Chance? Some combination? I don't know. What I do know is that survival comes with responsibility. I got to live. I got 79 extra years. Years that thousands of other boys didn't get. So I tried. To make them count. Tried to be a good husband. A good father. A good man. I told my story when people asked. Not to glorify war. Never that. But to remember. To honor the ones who didn't come home. War isn't glorious. It's not heroic. It's young men dying in mud and blood for reasons they don't always understand. But sometimes, in the middle of all that horror, there are moments of humanity. Moments of sacrifice. Moments where someone chooses another person's life over their own. That's what I did. Not because I was special. Not because I was brave. But because in that moment, those men were my brothers. And you don't let your brothers die if you can help it. The medal of honor is heavy. Not the physical medal. That weighs maybe an ounce. But what it represents. That's heavy. I've carried it for 79 years. Worn it to ceremonies. Seen it displayed in museums. Heard my story told to schoolchildren. Every time, I think about the men who didn't get medals. Who did things. Just as brave. Just as selfless. But nobody saw them. Nobody reported it. Nobody recommended them. I think about the men who died saving their friends. Who threw themselves on grenades and didn't survive. Who don't get to tell their stories. I'm grateful for the honor. I am. But I never felt like I deserved it more than anyone else who fought. We all did what we had to do. Some of us got lucky. Some of us got medals. Most just did their jobs and came home and never talked about it. They're heroes too. All of them. If you're young and thinking war is glorious, let me tell you, it's not. War is terror and blood and watching your friends die. It's cold and hunger and fear. It's things you can't unsee and memories you can't forget. Sometimes war is necessary. I believe that. Evil exists. Sometimes you have to fight it. But never think it's glorious. Never think it's fun. Never think it's anything but what it is, hell on earth. If you have to fight, fight for the person next to you. Not for flags or politics or abstract ideas. Fight to bring your brothers home. Fight to protect the people who can't protect themselves. And if you survive, if you get to come home, don't waste it. Don't waste the life you got, and others didn't. Live well. Love hard. Be kind. Make your time matter. That's what I've tried to do. 79 years of trying to be worth a second chance I got on a volcanic island in 1945. 2 seconds. That's all it took to change my entire life. 2 seconds to see those grenades. To make a choice. To jump. I've thought about those 2 seconds every day for 79 years. What they taught me is this: life changes in an instant. The choices we make in moments of crisis define us. Not the choices we make when we have time to think, but the ones we make when there is no time. In that moment, I didn't think about medals or glory or being remembered. I thought about the men around me. I thought, I can't watch them die. That's it. That's the whole thought. And it was enough. Since then, I've tried to live by that principle. When someone needs help, you help. When someone is in danger, you act. You don't think about the cost to yourself. You just do what's right. It doesn't have to be grenades. It can be small things. Helping a neighbor. Standing up for someone being treated wrong. Doing the hard thing because it's the right thing. Those choices matter. They add up. They make a life.